Good afternoon, everyone. Folks are just starting to log on, so we will just give everyone a minute. I love seeing those participant numbers jump up at the beginning. Okay. Again, as you're joining, we're just giving everyone another 30 seconds or so to log on. We know a lot of folks are excited to hear today's conversation. Okay, so welcome everyone to our conversation today on how Rhode Island, led from the top by Governor Daniel McKee and Commissioner of K-12 Education Angelica Infante-Green, is fighting chronic absenteeism, one of the most significant problems plaguing K-12 education since the pandemic. Chronic absenteeism is defined as missing at least 10% of the school year. In Rhode Island, it ballooned from 19% before the pandemic to 34% in the 21-22 school year. And this isn't just a Rhode Island issue. This is the same exact trend and kind of numbers that we saw in every single state across the country as a result of the pandemic. And why does chronic absenteeism matter? Well, it's linked to lower graduation rates and, of course, lower student achievement, because put very simply, students do not and cannot learn if they are not in school. But the reason we're here today is because by the end of last school year, the 23-24 school year, Rhode Island's rate was back down below 25%. And 82% of Rhode Island schools had lowered their chronic absenteeism rates from the previous year. So today we're going to talk about how Rhode Island has made this progress and what other states can learn about leveraging leadership, about cross-sector partnership, and data transparency to make a difference in the lives and academic outcomes of children. Brief housekeeping. The chat is disabled for this, but we do have Q&A available, and we are planning to take one or two audience questions towards the end. So please share with us all of your burning questions. And if we don't get to them today, we'll have ways that you can contact us and hopefully continue the conversation. We know this is an ongoing issue that states and cities and districts are working on every day across the country. So I now want to introduce Governor McKee, the governor of Rhode Island since 2021. Governor McKee, we're going to start with you, and I want to ask you, how and why did you decide to make chronic absenteeism and school attendance such a significant part of your goals as governor? And how did you decide what your strategy would be?
Well, we know that we wanted to raise our results in our schools. I set an agenda for doing just that, and then working with the commissioner and other, really strong people in education, asking, okay, how do we raise these results in our reading and math so that we lead the country on that category going forward? Because we know we can't reach the goals that I've set, Liz, in the state, in terms of raising incomes or the health issues that we're trying to make sure that people are healthy in the state. So unless we meet these goals. So giving that information as a goal and putting good people in the discussion and following that lead, I think, was very important. So the commissioner led the charge and crafted out this idea that, all right, if you want to measure something, let's measure attendance. Let's measure our reading and math outcomes, which we can do annually, but we knew that we could track our attendance daily, which was a really good thing to be able to share throughout the whole network of the state. So the other thing I think I bring to the table as being a former mayor, also a former chair of a school board of a school that I helped start, public school, realizing that professionals in the classroom, professionals in leadership positions like the commissioner can really help lead you towards the right measurements And so that attendance became that measurement in an overall program, Liz, that we've talked about, which is our Learn 365 program, which is exactly what it sounds like. We want in every home, every day, learning matters. And we're able to bring in, as a former mayor, we're able to bring in 38 out of our 39 municipal leaders, including one that you'll be talking to, Mayor Xay from Newport, Rhode Island, that have agreed to help us achieve these goals. So then when we started to explain to them too, through the leadership, whether it's Jerry Chiapetta in my office or the commissioner and her staff, or a higher ed commissioner, quite frankly, that we had involved, which is Angelica, and they were able to explain to the municipal leaders why if a child is healthy enough, they should be in school. That's the most important thing a family could do for a young person's future, is to realize that and actually do that. Now we have a statewide organization of leaders, from political leaders, education leaders, the business leaders, the nonprofit leaders, to the churches, all bought into this idea, this central idea that attendance does matter. And we're going to continue with the Learn 365. We're going to add a math matters shortly and a reading matters, so that we are getting the benefit of the attendance. But the commissioner will be able to really detail the data that has been so helpful in understanding who's in school and how they do, and who's not in school and how they do. And we're making families aware of this in a real direct way.
Yeah. I mean, Governor, one of the first things that I heard about you before I got to meet you in Providence in the spring was that you yourself were so invested in this data dashboard that you like to bring it up at various meetings. Can you talk a little bit about those data dashboards? I mean, Rhode Island, we're going to talk to the commissioner too, but the Rhode Island remains the only state in the country that has really gone all in on believing that putting this kind of regular data out there is critical. So how do you as the governor, use this tool that you guys have created?
Well, one of the things that we did in Learn 365, Liz, is we really offered up to the municipalities and everybody involved resources to help them achieve this idea that in every home, every day, learning matters. But we also have indicated to any of the people that are involved in this broad effort in the state that attendance matters, and we can show them why it does. And so when you talk about the idea that we really want to make sure that we got to be able to measure it, right? It doesn't do us any good. And I think that one of the issues that we have in a broader sense, outside of the commissioner's office, they measure, but that measurement has never really been understood in a real-time strategy. So this is something that they could really understand. So when we're talking to a mayor, Mayor Labate of North Providence, and we say to him, I want to show you the brand new schools that you just built in your community that the taxpayers invested millions and millions of dollars in, what your attendance rate is today. That was news to him. And so when you have this dashboard that I have in mind, that anybody can access, but I certainly do share, and I think I will share it with you if you came back into our office. It doesn't matter whether people are in for a meeting. I try to figure out a way to circle around, whether it's a business or an economic meeting, or whether it might be a healthcare meeting, or the continuous flow in our office of any governor would know that every day you're dealing with different things. Like I was trying to help build a bridge today, an actual bridge and an infrastructure. So now you're on talking about this. But so anybody who talked in my office, I asked the commissioner, how can I actually share with them real-time data? Because we can do this daily. And I can't do the reading and math daily, right? I can't do the FAFSA application, which was the third tier of the effort of the Learn 365, but I can do this attendance. So they were able to put together a really extraordinary tool that we can track every school in our state, and we can compare the attendance from the previous year to the current year. I believe that we're getting ready to, the commissioner let us know when that, we're starting to gather data, for the first few weeks of this year, and then we'll be putting that up again for the balance of the year. But what an important tool, and I can tell you why the eyes opened up wide when I have people in my office that are not doing education every day, but they could see a real-time data dashboard And then I could actually go to the different sections and show neighborhoods that are, you know, what neighborhoods are doing, what any particular school is doing. We can show in there the difference between you know, attendance and how it reflects in your outcomes in your reading and math. You know, well, if it's 10 to 20%, or if it's 30 to 40%, or it's 5 to 10%. All these things, the RIDE and their data team at you know, at RIDE under the commissioner's leadership was able to deliver to us, and now it's a brand in the state. So virtually anyone and everyone knows that we have an attendance matters plan going on. You'll be talking to Tom Giordano, and you know, someone that heads up a lot of the big businesses in the state who have contributed as well, and they'll tell you why they contributed. But I think the primary reason that we're getting buy-in is that you can measure, and that data board allows us to do that dashboard.
Thank you. And that's perfect segue for now bringing the commissioner into the conversation. So Commissioner, when we spoke also in the spring, so you told me that, and this just, I tell this to everyone because it really stuck with me. You told me that when the governor decided that chronic absenteeism was everyone's responsibility, including folks outside of education, that really changed things for you and for Rhode Island. And even already in this conversation, right? We heard the governor say that if we want to, you know, increase income, if we want to attack health problems, it has to start with this. And I have to say that I don't regularly hear leaders making explicit connection between improving school attendance and these broader economic, healthcare, other big social issues. So could you talk a little bit about what it's been like to lead the Rhode Island Department of Education, both through the pandemic and this post-pandemic gift that keeps on giving, including chronic absenteeism, and how has it helped you that the governor made this his signature issue?
Yeah, so I think the governor is being humble because he said, this is what we're going to do. And when people walked in and still walk into his office, he's got this leaderboard. Like, it doesn't matter what the meeting was, there was a leaderboard. Every person that came to see him got to see the leaderboard and got to see attendance. It was almost an obsession. Sorry, Governor. Which I appreciate, because I think that when we're all saying the same things, we can have a greater impact. But he gave us targets for assessment, attendance, FAFSA, and he said, this is what we're going to focus in on. And he has made it part of his everyday work. And for us in education, we don't usually get that kind of support, right? It's usually left up to the district and the school. And so this is unprecedented. When he talks to everyone and when he talks to mayors, that was really important. And that helped us iterate the tool. So we created this day-to-day tool that is live. We're the only ones that have it in the country. There was a piece of it, you know, because the governor always has his former mayor hat on. How do we give them data that's a little different than the way that we're used to, you know, promoting the data? So we put out geographic locations, not just the schools, but if you are a representative or if you are an elected official and your community is struggling with this, what are you going to do? What can you bring to the table? Because obviously this is not just a Rhode Island problem. This is a national problem that the pandemic has exacerbated. So it's going to take all of us to come together. And the governor knew that. So he has really pushed on elected officials, community leaders. What is your role in getting the kids back? And that's what's different about all this. It's everybody, all hands on deck, making sure that we're saying the same things. And in education, we're so used to just being in our own bubble that this felt different. And it felt, you know, at first, a lot of people were like, whoa, 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 we don't want everybody's hands in this. And now everybody's like, wow, we've seen change. We've seen everybody talking about it. We have people in the supermarket talking about it. And the other piece that is really important is all of government has worked together. So, you know, when the governor brought this to our cabinet meetings, it was expected that other cabinet members also chime in and support. And we did. We had the Secretary of Commerce come out, Commerce here in Rhode Island say, this is it. She wrote a letter to all our businesses and said, we need to do better. How can you help us out? Now we have the Department of Health also part of this campaign. We're going to be doing ground rounds with pediatricians in hospitals because of the Department of Health about chronic absenteeism. What is their role? This is an all-state approach that is very, very different. When we have billboards, sometimes, the governor has one idea about a billboard, I have another idea, and we meet in the middle about how to move it forward. And this is all real. What I'm expressing and sharing is real for us. It is not just on the shoulders of the principals and the teachers and the superintendents, but it is a whole community approach, because the governor's talking about the economic well-being of our state. This is bigger than just, what happens in the district offices.
Yeah, and I just want to pull out one thing you said a minute or two ago, right? Which is just that it's not just that you had a leader who was willing to get involved, it's also that the understanding that you guys also had to say, okay, we're going to let you play in our playground, and that there could be some natural reluctance perhaps or tension there. If you've ever worked in government, and I've also worked at a school district and a state education agency, you have your territory, but so I think that's an important because the next question that I want to bring up is the question we get all the time as we've been sharing the work that you've been doing in Rhode Island, which is from other states saying, how do we do this? So I do think it's important, while we're talking about all these good things that are going on, to also talk about where it gets real and where it gets hard, and how to anticipate perhaps some of those challenges. So I'd love to ask both of you, what is your advice to other governors, state education chiefs, mayors, district leaders, right? On how to create or how to start to create the kind of partnership that leads to the progress you're seeing.
Yeah, so let me tackle it from where I sit, and then the commissioner can tackle it from where she sits. But so we didn't shift right into an attendance matters board. We had multiple meetings, which I called in to kind of make sure that everybody felt comfortable with what we were doing. So we might have started with 20 people in a room. And we're just talking about, we really want to make this education thing really important. This is before I even announced at my State of the State address in 2023 that we were going to meet or exceed outcomes in every state in the country, right? So, but that groundwork is really important, because unless you really show, as the commissioner just said, that this is not and I got you moment. Right? This is a bring people together and talk about what we can do. And so I remember the first two meetings. One was we had higher ed there in the room with K through 12, and that meeting was higher ed explaining to the best they could what K through 12 could be doing for them. And then when we reconvened after a session, we reversed it, and we said, we actually said what K through 12 could kind of explain to the people at the table, whether it was higher ed or the business community, what could you do for us to make us work? So these were multiple meetings that started in a small group that grew out to a larger group of over 100. And then we were able to say, we can pull this off. And now we set the goals, right? And I get the benefit of my wife Susan being a career teacher, a reading teacher, through this whole process as well. So then now the structure is set. We set the goal, and we said, well, in 100 days, this was in January of 23, in 100 days, we'll come back. And that's where Mayor Xay came in, because he was the first municipal leader on board. And that's where the commissioner came in. And during those 100-day cycle, we kind of determined, okay, this is the plan. And then in April of 23, we went out with the plan. So I think it's not, I say all the time, it's not instant oatmeal. It doesn't happen just in a real quick push of a button or 30-second screen and I got oatmeal to eat. It's a lot of work, in terms of building the different constituent bases that you really need to all in on. And I would say, if I had to guess, I said 90% of the people we brought to the table stayed at the table. Right? There was always a couple that didn't, they wanted to be in their own lane. And what I just said to them, well, stay in your own lane, do the work you can. We'll stop this train every once in a while at a stop and a station stop, and you can get on if you like. So you're not going to get 100%. That's the other thing, Liz. And if you're trying to achieve a kumbaya effort on this, that's not going to work either. So I would hand it back to the commissioner, because during that time frame that led up to my statement, which she was very aware of, she was very aware I was going to say it, and she was like a little apprehensive about what the goal I was going to set publicly. And then leading up to that point, I had the confidence that we had the team in place. And then that 100 days, I had the confidence that that team was going to put a plan together so that we actually could be in Newport, Rhode Island, laying out the entire idea of a Learn 365 and all that entails with the attendant matters was part of it. And I can tell you, initially, there were a number of people who were very suspect to the effort. Some people, whether it was in the professions or whether it was in the media, they couldn't really see the vision that the commissioner and I shared. But then the last point I'll make and hand it over to the commissioner is, you got to stay the course. You can always kind of tact a little bit here and there, but you have to stay the course, and you can't let a couple words or a couple people's critiques take you off course. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of lesson 101 of how to actually put things together to have them stick in a bureaucracy like I have to deal with every day, and the commissioner does as well.
Yeah. So I want to piggyback a couple of things that the governor said that are really important. When we had this challenge go out, for us, it started with data, right? We have the dashboard because we knew that this was a problem for us. And the governor met with people that we don't normally meet with, right? A different constituency group. So that, for some people that made them uncomfortable. They were nervous. Oh, people are coming into our lane. But it wasn't punitive. It was about support. How do we support you to get there? Because we know that this is a really heavy lift. So we started with data. We had the dashboard. We also send out a survey every year to parents, teachers, and students. And in that survey that goes out statewide, parents said to us that missing 2 days a month was not a big deal. So we knew we needed a campaign, right? We based it on data because 2 days a month does make you chronically absent. So we looked at the data, we moved from there. What was really exciting for us were two things: that we knew the data, the governor was having different conversations with different constituency groups, and then I was having it with our constituency group, and then we brought them together. And then the other piece is that the governor had Learn 365 or has Learn 365, and he used his recovery money to support that, about getting kids to be getting learning all the time and attendance campaign. So he could have just said, Commissioner, you just do that with your pocket of money, but he put that pocket of money. So there was an action that followed that really helped our superintendents and our principals see that everybody's on board. Everybody wants this to move. So I think that was really important for all of us, is using the tools and then actually supporting. Because usually municipalities don't support in this area, but the governor gave everybody a challenge on that piece, had them sign compacts to say that we're on board, we're going to help. We're actually going to be a support to what's happening in the districts and the schools. And that was different. So we have the supports, the data, which is crucial so that we know what we're dealing with. And then we supported it with money. So it was an all-out campaign, and that's something that we have not had the privilege of doing in education in such a succinct way if we would have done it separately. And that's all hard. It's all hard to get on the same page. It's all hard to have people build trust. But I think that we are in a place that really makes sense. And the last piece that we did that I think is also really important, outcomes for students. We started reporting our outcomes based on chronically absent and not chronically absent. And we saw across the board that there was a 20 percentage point gap. No matter what grade level you looked at, that was really, really powerful for people to understand the importance of missing school. I know that we said it and we were having these conversations, but until all these things came together, people did not realize that. And that's why this whole statewide campaign has been really powerful and important.
Yeah, Liz, could I just add two real quick things? One is I think it's important, at least for us in Rhode Island, and people can kind of make the judgment outside Rhode Island, that we set a multi-year strategy. And I think that a lot of times we expect, instant, results. But I think that you've got to understand that this is going to be a multi-year strategy. So that's why it's part of our 2030 plan, right? And the other piece in there is, which I think that we're going to get, the next step now is parent engagement where the parents live, as opposed to parent engagement in the schools. So the next piece of this is going to be parent engagement where they live. So that when we get there, in order to get the idea that in every home, every day learning matters, we got to get to where they live. And so we're working on that. We've already had a couple strategies that are in place, and we'll circle back on that with you, because that's going to be the next piece of this partnership that will be there. Because if we don't stay the course, then a lot of this could actually fall apart. And then the message that we want to get delivered to the parents directly, or the guardians, whoever is managing a 5-year-old kid's life, is that if they're healthy enough, they should be in school. So if they're healthy, they should be in school. If they're feeling good enough, they should be in school. And that's probably that, in my mind, that's the most important thing that a parent can do at the moment, at that stage of their son or daughter's lives. For the future of that son and daughter, right? Is that if they're healthy to be in school, they need to be in school. And that's the investment that we need to get out to the parents now, and really share that with them in a way where we ask them, what do you want? What's your dream for your kid, right? What's your dream for your child? And then explain, and the commissioner can do this because of her background as an educator, and explain, the best investment you can make in your child right now if they're feeling well enough to have them in school.
Yeah, I just want to add one piece to that. That was about earlier when the governor, as we have these conversations, the governor would make personal phone calls. I make the phone calls, but to get a call from the governor, that's a big deal, right? That is huge to the principals. If schools did better, if they saw increments, that personal touch, obviously you're not going to do it with everybody, but once in a while that gets around, right? It really speaks to the genuine concern, need, and urgency that we have about getting kids into school. So I wanted to mention that because I call and it's people like that. They like to hear that, but I'm not the governor, right? When the governor calls, it's a different feeling. It's a different sense of appreciation and urgency.
Well, I know we're wrapping up our time with the governor. So Governor, I wanted to ask you one last sort of brief comment, which is like, if we get together in a year from now, what do you hope to be able to say?
Well, I hope that, I expect, and I think that I believe is going to happen, is that our attendance is going to continue to improve, and that our outcomes and our results in our schools will improve as well. And what I anticipate is that the brand that has to do with attendance matters, which has already taken hold, that we're going to add a math matters to that. And a year from now, we're going to be talking about what have we done intentionally about math improvement. And I'll let the educators really nail that down, but we know we need teachers in there. We need to invest in ways to get teachers in math, and we need to make sure that math is okay. One of the places we went this summer, which the commissioner set up at a high school, which was a summer math program, and I had this wonderful conversation with this incoming freshman, and I was saying, math matters, and she looked right at me, and she's pretty smart, but she says, and somebody said, I hate math or something like that, and I said, well, why do you hate math? And this young lady said, because it's hard. So you ask the question, I think what the answer would be a year from now, that would be more and more people who would be embracing learning, you know, on a 365 level, like I learned 365, and know that the investment you're making is not always easy, and some of the things that need to be done that you get the most benefit out of is the fact that they're challenging and you're meeting that challenge. So I would hope that Rhode Island would be continuing to meet the challenges that the commissioner and I are laying out in front of them in a way which is really with a level of enjoyment and a level of excitement, that they're actually letting their kids know how important it is for them to be learning, and that the kids are having fun doing it.
I love that, and the idea of embracing that hard things can be good things. Is part of it too. Well, thank you so much, Governor McKee. You've been extremely generous with your time today. And we're going to say farewell to the governor, and we're going to say hello to two other folks representing two other important parts of this story. Mayor Xay from Newport and Tom Giordano from Partnership Rhode Island. And we get to keep the commissioner with us. So everyone wins. So, Commissioner, we have been talking about partnership, and I just have to say also, and just leadership, right? Like, to me, so much of the story of what the governor said is just that there's nothing new. There's nothing about this story that's 21st century. This is just, right. He decided this is what he cared about, and then this is, and it's working, it seems. But one of the things that's really struck me is that in addition to everything we just learned about what the governor's done, you also have people like Tom here rallying the business community. You've got municipal leaders like Mayor Xay embracing the urgency, talking about chronic absenteeism. He made time to talk to me, I think, from his car while he was like going to talk to at a Coast Guard event about an industry thing, like all this stuff going on. So who are the partners outside of education that you see as critical to this work? Which is the question I was already going to ask, but I'll say we're getting quite a few audience questions also as we've been talking about, like, who are these other folks? You know, you had mentioned Department of Commerce, like, who are these other constituents that are playing an important role?
Yeah, so it is all of government. That I'll start off there. It's all of government. And so every department, we've been working with the Department of Health, pediatricians, you know, sending out letters to the business community saying, hey, you know, don't let kids come to work before, you know, the day's over. We need your support. We need you to talk to your employees. I mean, all those things. But the strongest partnership has been with the Partnership for Rhode Island, right? When we went to them collectively and said, hey, this is important, we need your help, they stood up right away and said, we're going to do this. They helped us with videos. They helped us, you know, have the conversations with the business community. Those are partners that sometimes a school district can bring one or two people in, but this is about statewide, right? So how do we have those conversations? How do we give incentives to schools? How do we talk about this in places that we wouldn't normally have these conversations? So the Partnership for Rhode Island has been essential in us doing that work. And then with the mayors, so we have met with the mayors, the governor meets with the mayors, but our office has met with the mayors to say, well, what are we going to do? What can we do to support and help and give you more information? This is not something that we used to do in the past, where we would give their performance information, their attendance information to the mayors. So they have been invaluable. Like Mayor Xay has taken this and run with it. You know, we're trying to keep up with him as he does this work. And that's what we want to see. We want to see people take this and support the districts on the ground. And these have been invaluable partners. We know we couldn't have made the progress that we've made without their support. So you have unlikely partners like Burger King, for example, gave us thousands and thousands of vouchers, like little things. And then there's the bigger thing that we're talking about today, when it's all hands, you know, an all hands on deck approach. that we have been able to have, but because of the leaders that you're going to be hearing from in the next few minutes, they have really made this happen. I went to the partnership recently and said, hey, I need a person just dedicated to this. Can you make this happen on our team? And it was a yes, 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 right? They're in. And that's why this has been important for us, because if it's just us in education doing this, we're not going to get as much traction. And that's what you'll hear from them.
Yeah, thank you. So Mayor Xay, I know being the mayor isn't your only job. And I also know that the families who live in Newport year round and who attend Newport public schools might not be the families that people first think of when they hear Newport, Rhode Island. So could you tell us a little bit about your town? And also about when you first learned that chronic absenteeism was a problem in Newport schools, and how you see your role as mayor contributing to solving this problem.
Well, I look at my role first as being part of a broader education system, not just a school system. I really believe that if we want to meet the moment right now with what students need after having gone through obviously a very challenging period, but also with education having changed substantially, that we really need to think about a broader education system where the student, the child is at the center, the school is the through line constant, but every other part of the community, whether it's elected officials like myself, the local level, our business community, all have a role in supporting the learning and the outcomes that our students are held accountable to. Now, Newport is probably not what you'd expect if you watch the Gilded Age, if you watch our television and tourism commercials. 2/3 of our students qualify for federally free and reduced lunch. About half are people of color or coming from single parent households, and 1/3 are actually coming from non-English speaking households. And so those are, I think, some pretty shocking demographics for people that they don't necessarily think of when they think of Newport itself. The absenteeism rates themselves are equally shocking. Nearly 50% of our high school students in the 2023 academic year were chronically absent. 1/3 of our elementary and middle school students were chronically absent. So we clearly had an issue. But for me, when it clicked, was actually a personal interaction I'd had. I had just done a bike to school program with a bunch of kids in the morning riding out of the school. I saw one of my neighbors from a pretty nice neighborhood dropping off their kid at the local elementary school. And I didn't really think much of it. I rode my bike down to the bagel shop after that to grab a bagel and a coffee. And I saw her walk in with her other child. And I said, hey, what's going on? It's a school day. And she said, well, we just needed a mental health day. And that's when it hit me. It hit me that a big part of our problem here are not the demographics that we're having to grapple with right now, but it's a cultural problem where families don't understand the importance of being in school every single day. That's why when I heard from this governor, somebody that I've known since he was sitting in a role like mine as a mayor of a small community, focusing on education, and I saw his phone call come through on a Sunday morning, I thought to myself, he's onto something. This is important, and I've got to listen, I've got to lean in, I've got to follow through. That's really what they have done. They have set a very clear North Star that regardless of what your community looks like, is a clear message supported by the data that everybody can get on board with.
Well, thank you. And now to Tom, right? So Tom, you're here. Sorry, I was like so into that answer. You like totally made me lose my spot, Mayor Xay. Like that, this is like, you're very good. And it's just very compelling. So thank you. So Tom, you're here representing the business leaders of Rhode Island, but why do business leaders care about chronic absenteeism? And what would you say has been the biggest impact the business community has made in this collective effort to improve attendance?
Well, listen, I'll agree with Mayor Xay on everything except that if my phone rings and it's the governor on Sunday morning, I'm thinking about what I did wrong over in the past week and not what a fun project is that's coming ahead. Now, listen, this from a business perspective, right? It's often hard, particularly for very large employers, right? For public companies to participate in education, right? You get sticky issues very, very fast, right? Whether it be a union issue or a charter issue or a public versus private issue, or a testing issue or whatever it is, we have tried to, and I think successfully, kind of, thread that needle and engage in a way that is non-controversial, right? In activities that are going to better the state, right? Attendance is a moral imperative and economic opportunity for this state. Very, very clear, because we have growing companies. All 15 of the companies that are on my board are growing. And we have a shrinking population in the Northeast region, right? So what are you going to do? You need to do better with the population that's here. And that's engaging with them in every step in the academic process, right? Whether that be attendance in K-12, work-based learning, and career exploration in high school, and internships, and ideally a hiring pipeline, right, in post-secondary, right? So if you are going to talk about the need for a future workforce, you need to engage, right? And that, I think, is what we've shown from the business point of view. It makes sense. As far as, and to answer some of the questions that came up here, this was more than in-kind costs. We've put actual cash on the table here by producing the videos and by hiring, helping the commissioner hire some staff members to the tune of about $200,000, and happy to go into more detail about that, because we're open about these investments, because it sounds kind of scary for business community or business association groups to say, we can't really engage here. No, you can, and you can make a big difference for a lot less funding than you think needs to happen. And this partnership has been fantastic. Listen, we wanted to, and told the governor and the commissioner, we want to give you tools, right, to do what you are experts at. We are not experts at this. We don't want to tell you how to run your education program. Love to have a seat when you're looking for advice, but tell us what you need so that we can help give you a tool in your toolbox. And I think we've done that correctly.
And I'd love to jump in on that if that's okay. I think, you know, Tom hit it right on. Is these are not big dollars that it takes to move the needle on this. If they're tools that everybody can use, and data is a really good example of one of those tools that, with the governor's leadership, our education department really did a phenomenal job of pressing out. For school leaders, for our guidance counselors, for our principals, for our teachers, having the data understand clearly which students are struggling, not just because you might notice they're not in the classroom, but the data actually proves out that they're struggling and they're missing, gives them the additional reason they need to press out, to reach out to those students to see what is it that is causing the issue. Why is it that you aren't in school? Is there bullying going on? Is it transportation? And then let us help you solve for that. For business leaders, for elected officials like myself, the data is very helpful because it helps us get behind the message itself. It gives us the reason to be consistent with every time we see a child saying, hey, how are you doing with attendance this year? Or every time we speak to a group of college athletes saying, hey, it's really important that when you see an elementary school kid after practice, watching you or coming to one of your games, that you ask them what they're reading right now and how attendance is going this year. And similarly, for our community partners and our community programs, having that data also helps them be a secondary outreach for students, that they understand there's a network of adults or community that really cares about whether or not they're showing up in school because it's important.
Yeah. So I want to add, because I see that people are asking for specific strategies. You've heard all of them, but it starts with data. I think the mayor, you don't know how big a problem you have unless you have a data system that lets you inform people, lets you educate people. But then the second piece is, how does it impact what's happening in the classroom? And that is really key. And like I said, our performance data is based on whether you're chronically absent or not. And what we're seeing now, that if you are chronically absent 2 years, but you come back and are not chronically absent, we're able to recover you. That was one of our greatest fears. Like, what do we do with these kids that have been chronically absent year after year? But that we have data that now shows that. So the data is important, the partnership, and different strategies for different grade levels. If kids are not coming in elementary school, those are the parents, right? What's going on with the family? What message resonates with them? Will they be reading by third grade if we're seeing that they're chronically absent kindergarten and first? Probably not. Then parents do care about that. So messaging, getting data and messaging it out there and working with the partners. If your family is hearing it from the school, but now they run into the mayor, or the mayor is talking about something else and weaves in chronic absenteeism. And then you have the partnership really talking to the business community. How can we support? It's not just the funding, it's also their messaging that has been really critical. It has to come from every direction. And I will say that what we're doing with the pediatricians is really important. Who are the people that parents trust? It is usually pediatricians. Like, who do they go to get answers? And those are the people that we're working very, very closely with. We just put one of those videos that the partnership helped pay for in our children's hospital. So they can't watch regular television until they watch this video on chronic absenteeism so that they know what it is. That's important. It needs to come from every direction, because something happened during the pandemic, exactly like the mayor said. mental health. The Surgeon General just put out a paper on parents not being okay. So it is not just the students, it is across the board. How do we get this message out in sync?
And Commissioner, I'll add one other very small tactic, right, to your larger vision for what this is on a statewide and why it's been impactful. One of the videos that we produced was with the Providence Journal's high school sports reporter, okay? The Providence Journal's high school sports reporter has more hits and views on social media than anyone that all of us know personally, right? Especially on Fridays and Saturdays in the fall with high school football, right? He said, I'm going to post my attendance video every Friday morning and every Saturday morning so that when people are looking and kids and parents are looking to see highlights from their game or their rivals' games, they're going to see my attendance video to talk about attendance matters. That is the type of buy-in that we're talking about. It's a very small tactic, right? It was a 12-minute portion of our 3 days of filming, but it's an effective piece and it helps give you a sense of the level of detail we're thinking about here.
And I think it's a great example of what, as an outside observer, I really saw is the level of saturation I think that you've achieved in Rhode Island of the number of people who are saying the same things, right? Singing from the same songbook in many different conversations that I had with, including folks at a school district, including with principals, right? That it's that level of saturation that and the commitment to being part of the ongoing work. That is, it's not a button you could push, but it's the thing that it really, I left Rhode Island feeling like they're all doing the same things.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And I'll tell you that even if you're having a press conference about something else, throw the attendance in there. There is not, it really is connected to everything that we do, right? So that is important for us. We had Joe Mazzulla, who's the coach for the Boston Celtics, now that Tom brought that up, and he's from Rhode Island. And I said, give us a message on attendance. And he just went off and gave us this great message. And I was like, yes, like that wasn't about attendance, but we made it about attendance. We make everything about attendance.
Yeah. And so, Commissioner, we're also getting quite a few questions that just if you could take 1 minute to answer, which is that folks are wondering, did you need additional funding to build this data? Was there something special about the data that you had to do differently? Some of those pieces, which I know the answers to, but I'd love if you could just kind of share, the answers to that, which I think will say a lot about what other states can do.
So we created it in-house. Our data tool was created by our own people. What we did take advantage of during the pandemic is that we got all the data systems to talk, right? And that's important. A lot of our data systems don't talk. So they now talk, and that's why we get real-time data. And we're able to help particularly small districts that don't have a comms team, that don't have so we put out nudges, right? And a nudge tool is like a phone call to parents, a text to parents, like, hey, what's going on? You've missed X number of days. But that was all created in-house with our regular funding. This is something that we thought was really important. And I have a wonderful data team that, and we keep iterating on it. So now we're adding this, it just went live again, and we're adding data on how the kids are doing. Like, what is the difference? You can compare it. So we keep iterating, and we also have a teacher attendance data on there. All these things play together. We're talking about students really being on task and getting that information. Now we have people that normally wouldn't go to our website looking up this data because everybody's talking about it. The grandmother, well, let's see how did your school do? We started creating competitions and using that data. We started having schools across the state compete with one another. Hey, that school went up 3 points. What about you? Right? And we have then the kids involved. We have a video contest that's happening right now where the kids are creating videos on absenteeism, and we're going to give them scholarships. So there's many ways of doing this, but without the data, it is very hard to have a campaign that can actually focus in on and really drill down.
Yeah. And I'll also just add that I know that one thing I hear a lot is that folks say, well, Rhode Island's very small, so it must be easier for them to do this work. But I think that somehow also people think that small somehow equals perhaps a more homogeneous student population. And I just want to say that like Providence alone, actually, folks, you might not know this, but Providence, Rhode Island, the public school district there has one of the most like language diverse districts, I believe, in the country. I think you said there's over 50 different languages spoken within the district. So in case you were thinking that Rhode Island is small and therefore, you know, maybe kids are more similar than, you know, wherever you live, just FYI, that's not the case. So I just wanted to add that context because I do really believe that this is something that others can replicate if you choose that this is the model that you want. But I think that all of us can agree that this work is far from done.
Absolutely.
And I'd asked the governor earlier, kind of if we get together in a year from now, what do you hope to be able to report? And so I would like to ask all of you the same thing, like, what do you hope to have achieved from your particular vantage points on the issues of chronic absenteeism, attendance, but really what we're talking about, right, is student outcomes and a thriving Rhode Island. So where do you hope to be in a year from now?
I'll jump in, right? I think we got to keep our foot on the gas. As the governor said, you have to be consistent and follow through on strategies once you commit to them. We've seen very good improvements so far. Again, we had a chronic absenteeism rate at the high school of 45%. That is down to 30%. I'm hoping we will track on that through the rest of the year. Similarly, the elementary school level, about 1 in 3 students, about a third of our students were chronically absent. That's down to about 25% right now. So our biggest hope is that when we get through the school year, those numbers hold or even slightly improve. The ultimate goal, obviously, though, is improving educational outcomes themselves. We're very confident that'll happen. One of the areas that we have expended the resources that we've received from the governor is taking our community partners who really serve as some of our best force multipliers in terms of having an impact on programs like this. Use that data, shared it with them, share the curriculum that we're using in the classroom so that the work they're doing in their after-school programs is perfectly aligned with what we're doing in the classroom, the messaging that we're providing throughout the community. That's having real results, and I'm very optimistic about that actually truing out to improved educational outcomes for our students.
Bob, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll take the second. You know, I think very clearly, I think a success here is more Rhode Islanders at work, right? And I think for employers, that is, it almost sounds selfish, but it's not, right? Because they're hiring constantly, and we want more people to come to Rhode Island to work at some of these amazing companies that we have. And number two, we want to build that employer alignment through the education system so that they're not constantly worrying about when they're going to get next year's batch of talent from, right? That's what we want. And like we said from the start, this is an economic opportunity as much as it's a moral imperative for the state to improve our education system. And we know we have experts in the classroom, right? Let's help get the students there and let the experts do their work.
Yeah. So, you know, my hope is the same as everybody else's, that we continue to see decreases, but then we continue to see the things that are happening in the classroom expand. We know that when the kids come to school, they are actually learning. We see it in our results, but we have changed our secondary regs. This tool is invaluable for all our policy decisions as well. So I think that that's important. So if you come back a year from now, we're going to see more declines in chronic absenteeism, but you're going to see new policy in place, right? That's what we do at the state level. There's going to be new policies, new supports, new guidance on what to do. Because there's always pushback. I know that there was a question about, did we get pushback? Of course, there's always pushback. There are also people that don't think that this is the place where we should be investing in. We're investing in all of them, but we're bringing this to light. If the kids don't come to school, they can't benefit from what we're offering. And I think that is the challenge that we are faced with as a nation. So that's why we're pushing this. So come back a year from now, you're going to see different policy, you're going to see different groups at work, you're going to see it infiltrated into everything that you see in Rhode Island. And yes, we're smaller. However, that makes it very complicated because everybody has these individual ideas of how to get things done. And what we're trying to support is sort of a net approach where we bring everybody under the same tent to have those conversations, and we can give them tools that they can use in addition to what they're doing on the ground. So we're going to see more gains and hopefully more tools that districts can use.
One other important thing that I just wanted, Commissioner, to ask you to highlight, because you mentioned this to me kind of offhanded when I ran into you at something this summer, which is that, and it sounds like an important first step that you had to do was make sure that everyone was using the same definition of attendance and absenteeism. Could you just say a little bit about that?
Yeah, what became really real for us is that in one district, being absent was missing one class. In another district, it was if you came before 12 o'clock. You know, it was sort of a hodgepodge. So we need to have policy, or that's what policy, that this is what it means to be absent across the state, not very individualized, because we couldn't compare it. It was very difficult to have that conversation. And what does it mean if you've missed half the day? You know, how do we calculate that? All that was important conversations that we had last year that then leads to policy change. And that was really an eye opener, because we made the assumption that we were all talking about the same thing, and we were not.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up because there's a sort of bipartisan push right now led by a handful of organizations, EdTrust and AEI and Attendance Works, that, you know, to ask states to commit to cutting the rate of chronic absenteeism in half in the next 5 years. I believe Rhode Island is signed on. And I wanted to bring this up because I think that as other states are hopefully watching this and thinking about trying to emulate some of the work that has been working in Rhode Island, is that it's really important to make sure that you're sort of dotting your I's and crossing your T's on the fact that, like, you have defined very explicitly what it means to be present and absent and what the data means, so that you know that your progress is real.
Yep, absolutely. And I think the next piece for us is, you know, somebody was asking about the root causes and what were the things. So we're gathering that data. And then as a state leaders, we have to be able to support, right? Like, so what's our next step? We know that this is a problem. So how do we help the districts? We know that mental health is an issue, mental behavioral health, you know, people's attitudes. So how do we support what's happening on the ground? So that is really important. And we're getting ready to make a huge announcement this week about what the state is going to do to support the districts, all because of this data. That's why these data systems matter.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mayor Xay and Tom, I just, you know, we have a minute or two left. So is there anything else about this work, about what your either challenges that you might feel nervous about, or anything else that you're particularly excited to see happen in the coming months?
All about engagement. I had a parent stop me the other day. I spent a lot of time in the public schools, and they said, not just has my child's reading improved 2 grade levels since they enrolled in the program, but he's excited to go to school every single day now. As we start to think about how we improve public education, figuring out how we engage with kids is really important. And this is one of those areas where we know we can have an impact, and I'm confident that will yield long-term results.
Tom, any last words?
No, yeah, absolutely. Listen, the data is everything, right? The data allows me to go back to my board for continued funding for this, right? It shows the progress. It shows that what we're doing is working. So it's teamwork wrapped around in data so that we know which way to row. And I think that we're seeing we're heading in the right direction. So, Commissioner, thank you for your leadership in this effort.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you to the Commissioner, Tom, Mayor Xay. Thank you again to Governor McKee and his team, and to all of you who joined us today. If we did not get to answer your question, please feel free to reach out. My email is liz.cohen@georgetown.edu. You can also go to future-ed.org. That's where all of our work lives, including the report that we wrote on Rhode Island called Team Sport. So we've got all the sports metaphors going, and rowing metaphors, and all metaphors lead to Rhode Island. That's where we're at today. But we hope to continue this conversation and look forward to continuing to report on hopefully continued success in Rhode Island. And thank you for the work you're doing for Rhode Island's kids and for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And good luck to everyone.
Absolutely.